near that. That's the main one, right?
Yeah, we're standing right in front of this. We're standing right in front of this and it's running.
Concerned that it's going to have these actual things.
Right now that school is kind of wobbly.
We're going to get started in about a minute. If everyone can sort of take their seats and turn your phones off. I'm very much looking forward to getting through this debate in one piece.
Excuse me, I just want to
And given last week, I think we always need positivity. So, okay. Keep it positive. No heckling, no shenanigans. And I just want to welcome these three gentlemen to the debate and congratulate them for winning. I have index cards on the front table. If anyone wants to submit a question that they want me to read after the moderation is over, if you could keep those questions to subjects that I haven't already covered in the moderation, it would be great. If you actually want to come up to the podium and ask a question, I would ask you also to keep those subjects, not personal attacks, to keep them to subjects that were not addressed. We do have a second debate in 2 weeks from now, and anything that's not covered this evening, we can certainly tackle the next time. And with that, on with the show. These first three questions each don't need a rebuttal. We're just going to go down the line. Start with George. Please state your current name, your current occupation, and tell us briefly why you are running for mayor of Greenport Village.
Okay, my name is George Hubbard. I'm an auto mechanic by trade. I'm the current mayor right now. I've been on the village board for 16 years. I've enjoyed serving all of you, trying to make our village a better place, trying to beautify the village with work that I've been doing. I appreciate the job. I have a lot of fun in it. I enjoy going to events with the kids, giving speeches, commending people, swearing to people in the fire department, unity picnics, a lot of all different functions that the mayor gets invited to. And it's been a pleasure for me to go and represent Greenport in a positive way and give positive encouragement to everybody, all the events that I go to. I really want there's some projects that we have in the works right now. I'd like to see them completed. That's what I want to try to take care of if I'm re-elected again for 4 more years. And that's really what I'm hoping for. I want to keep working for everybody that's here because I'm honored to do that and I really enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Richard Vandenburgh, and I am running for the office to be in service as mayor. Since actually my occupation is I'm an attorney, I guess, by training, but as most of you may know, I opened up the Greenport Harbor Brewing Company in town 14 some odd years ago. The reason why I want to be mayor is because since I've been a young boy, my parents always taught me that you should work in service of your community, giving back wherever and whenever you can. That lesson was reinforced. And as a young boy in Scouts, when I continued to learn to give back to my community on my way to becoming an Eagle Scout. So that service, working in service of the community and giving back wherever I can continues today. I've been in the community for 34 plus years, always tried to lead by example. I believe that the most effective leaders do just that. I believe that my record and my engagement in the community stands on its own and speaks for itself. From early days as a young attorney and young father, serving on various committees and organizations in the community, from the East End Drug Task Force to Cub Scout pack leader to Boy Scout troop chairman, I've always tried to step up and be engaged. With the support of my family, we built the brewery, renovated the old firehouse, but I've continued to work to be engaged in other organizations as well. And I can tell you I would want to bring stability and transparency to our government and our governing process. I want to make sure we're all included in the decision-making for our village. And I want to do all of that in service to our community. I have the skills, I believe I have the experience, I have the drive, and I know I can do the job.
Good evening, my name is Kevin Stuessi and I live on... Good evening, my name is Kevin Stuessi and I live on Clark Street in Greenport. My family and I decided to make Greenport our home long before I decided to run for office. This is a very special place for me. I am currently a development consultant and operate independently. I spent many years as an executive for several different large companies, 2 publicly traded companies and 1 large development firm, which was the largest owner and developer of affordable housing in the country. Greenport is at a crossroads, and in my short time here, I've seen the development pressures all of us are concerned about. I've lived that in my career, and I've also lived that in my life. When I was growing up in a small community in Northern California, when we first started there, as I was born in my first 10 years, we had farms, orchards, and all of that was gone by the time I graduated high school. Spent some time in cities and eventually decided to escape to raise my daughters with their mother, and we moved to a small town in Idaho. That small town faced many of the same issues we're facing here, dealing with affordable housing, infrastructure problems, overdevelopment with hotels, and a lot of the same things that I'm hearing from my neighbors and friends that I've met over the past few months since I started walking around with petitions for the moratorium. If you are like me, I promise an open local government, transparency, and community meetings to get deep engagement. I care what each and every one of you want for our community.
George, what are your key qualifications for the position of mayor? How would you describe your managerial and decision-making style, and what differentiates you from the other candidates?
Okay, I think the village is a very complex business with the amount of water, sewer, electric, road department, fire department, that there's a lot to take on and to control and oversee as all that happens. It's not like a town supervisor has minimal things. We've got a very complex village, and it just takes a lot of time and devotion to work towards this and keep track of all that. And I think the experience of working on the budgets, I was awarded the fire department for 22 years. I know the fire department very well, what goes on there. I'm a 45-year member of the fire department, so I've got a lot of experience there. The budgets that we've worked on over the past 8 years have been minimal tax increases. We tried to keep a line on it, use grants for other things, and just the knowledge and the connections made through going to the East End supervisors and mayors meetings, interconnecting with other politicians, trying to bring county money. We use county money at the end of Clark Street, Brown Street, and 4th Street for a sewer project, and just meeting with those people, meeting them, call up and say, hey, look, can you help us out with this project? I think the connections are a very valuable asset to moving forward with the village and trying to continue bringing money in and getting projects done. And I think that's what makes me qualified to try to continue the job.
Same question. So, yeah, I believe that, as the mayor said, George has said, that, it does require a certain level of skill to run a village, and that village ultimately has to be run and looked at as a business in some respect. But I also think the village needs to be operated in a way that is inviting and completely assistive of our community. In other words, when you walk into Village Hall, you should be treated as though you're being treated walking into a hotel or a resort where they ultimately act as a concierge to make sure that whatever your problem is, whatever your issue or question is, that they are going to find the answer for you and not simply potentially be dismissive, gruff, ultimately not helpful. We need to make sure that the village begins to operate in a way that is absolutely assistive to our residents and to our business members in a way that's constructive and forward-thinking. I have, been running a business. I actually started out as a managing partner in a law firm, managing attorneys. Developed the Greenport Village business. Ultimately, I've run that business for a number of years. We have 70+ employees. I'm also finishing up my term as the president of the New York State Brewers Association. We have 428 members, roughly 3,000 people that ultimately we lead in a way that is progressive, forward-thinking, benefit-oriented. So I feel like the job that I could bring, the structure that I could bring to the village would be to redefine how we engage with our community, making sure that everyone actually has an opportunity to have a voice, be heard, and understand that they are a valuable asset within our community.
I believe my experience in business will be enormously helpful for the village. As I said earlier, we're at a crossroads. There are many things that we're facing. Some of those things are developers not just knocking on our door, but they're sitting in our living room, and they're trying to make decisions for us. I've sat across the table from big developers, and I know how to deal with them. Any of you who have been in any of the recent village meetings, whether it's with the planning board or also with the trustees, I've stood up to these developers who say they know better than we do. I don't believe they do. At the same time, I have the business experience to deal with a financial balance sheet. And one of the skills that I've had throughout my life and my career is dealing with problems and with change. We have many things that we need to deal with. There are a number of items that are going to need to be repaired or completely replaced over the next several years and into the next decade. This is why I spent well over a month walking, knocking on doors, and pushing for this moratorium. I did, in a very short time, something that hadn't been done but had been talked about for many years. When I put my mind to doing something, I get out there and do it. We passed the moratorium. The law is now in effect. We're pushing forward. And as far as small businesses and the need to keep those going, it's happening. A number of small businesses are changing over, including Kate's Cheese, which is a wonderful local person who just retired and has been bought by Frank, a wonderful new neighbor who is opening a new store there. I think there's a lot we can do, but we need a plan in order to do it, and we need to make sure that we protect the pocketbook of the city and each one of ours as residents.
This is for all of you. We'll start with George. What do you think are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges facing Greenport, and briefly, what is key to navigating through them successfully? What do you think are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges facing Greenport, and briefly, what is the key to navigating through them successfully?
Okay. Well, right now we have, everybody's talking about the development, what's going on downtown. As a board, we've been working on stuff for almost a year now. We have not gotten that completed yet, but there were code changes and stuff to protect the proliferation of hotels, and restaurants and bars in the waterfront commercial. We've had several different ideas that have not been able to come to fruition yet. One was an overlay district, one was creating 2 separate zones downtown. To do that, to make sure we protect what's left of the working waterfront, what's going on downtown. We've also worked on, parking has been an issue in Greenport for 50 years. We're trying to come up with ways of doing something about parking. We've actually proposed redoing West Lane, the fireman's track up there, and getting the shuttle service running so employees can park up there instead of in the village and taking up parking spots in residential districts in downtown. We also have a project that we're working on is connecting Sandy Beach and Safe Harbor Marinas. We've got 400 boat slips down there. We've got 2 restaurants, and we have 26 residents that live on Sandy
The working waterfront is our biggest concern, that is our biggest focus. I believe we need to double down on the investment of what that working waterfront should be relative to preserving the character and the authenticity that Greenport has always known and loved with that area of our village, supporting the marine aquaculture business and related businesses that should thrive there, creating an opportunity for educational opportunities for our next generation to learn trades and be able to find a way to have a job in our area and stay here, continue to live here rather than leave the area. Of course, that means that we have to have housing. There has to be an opportunity to avail yourself of reasonably priced, safe housing. We need to really keep an eye on the Airbnb process, because the Airbnbs will come in and ultimately taking a lot of our housing stock away. The second home and vacation homes. Ultimately, those people have a right to own those homes, but the Airbnb business could be the undermining of our structure and our security of our next generation. I think the most important thing to do is to bring back real life, and that would mean continuing to incentivize and support small businesses, family-owned businesses down in the village, as well as continuing to figure out ways to make sure that the residents are not feeling crowded out, over-congested, unable to park where they want to. All of that is just built on design and opportunity to figure out solutions by engaging the public.
My single biggest goal over the next 4 years, if I'm elected your mayor, is to put a plan in place, deal with our infrastructure, and go for funding. The federal government enacted a massive $1 trillion infrastructure bill just in the past year. In early November, Proposition 1 passed in New York State. That's an additional $4.5 billion. I believe this village needs a plan. We should have already had our hands out to both the federal government and the state government looking for funding. We should have been getting funds to make repairs on all the things that we need them for, whether it's the bulkheads that are going to age over the next several years, the docks, the fisherman's pier that is starting to fail. These are things that need help. We also need to take a look at revenue generating items. Things like what we're charging tourists to come in for the summer and park their fancy boats out there. We should be comparing against other places, looking at ways to drive revenues instead of simply looking at cutting costs. When one takes a look at only cutting costs, you end up in a situation where you have even deeper problems. We need to be putting our hand out there and asking for funds. This past year, the governor enacted a new grant program that we could have applied for last year for $4.5 million for Eastern Long Island. We did not apply. This is something, if I'm elected, I will immediately start the process of applying for in the next several months. It's time to put a plan in place, get things fixed, and make sure that you and I are not having to fund things off of our backs as taxpayers, and that we're looking to others to help supply the funds needed that are available for a designated, economically disadvantaged community like we have.
There are residents within our Greenport zip code that are ineligible to vote despite being vested in the community, having their kids in Greenport schools, for instance. There are business owners also vested in the community who are ineligible to vote. Why should an exception be made for you to hold the actual office of the mayor when you have only recently retained a Greenport Village address to satisfy your eligibility?
I understand the question. I know it's been a hot topic for a lot of people. 34 years ago, I've been here after 34 years, and after 34 years, last year I decided to run for mayor. I've been involved in the community for 34 years, but really 2 years ago I started to look for a home to buy in the village. I shopped and visited a number of properties. I actually put in a number of offers, and I was consistently outbid by offers that were well over asking price. So to date, I haven't been able to buy a home in the village. I did decide to run for mayor, so it really then became a question of the form versus substance of what my objective was. It's not to take over and go crazy and run anything into the ground. It was really basically to try and lead and develop a plan that the village could be proud of and we could all work towards. So it really becomes a form versus substance. The form says, I have to legally declare my intent to live in the village. And I did that. I ultimately found an apartment that was affordable enough for me to pay rent. I opened up a utility account. I changed my registration, my license, my cars, my voter status. I even changed the address for my legal license to the village of Greenport. So I took care of the form aspect in terms of satisfying the legal requirements. I know people are more interested in the substance of my relationship with the village. And as I say, after 34 years, I feel like I've established a significant basis to say that I will and I intend to live in the village of Greenport. If you think about it, you could say Greenport is essentially 1 square mile of ground. I bought a piece of that ground 14 years ago. I've been paying taxes on it. I've done what I can. I put my heart, my sweat, my tears, my blood into that ground. I've nurtured the roots that we put down there. I've been involved in other organizations in the village as well. So I can say that ultimately I stand behind the fact that I will indeed live in the village of Greenport if I'm elected mayor.
Comment or rebuttal on that? Moving along. Kevin, you were instrumental in drafting and coordinating the petition for a moratorium on any development within the commercial, retail, and waterfront zones for 6 months. Why was this a significant endeavor for you? And for the other candidates, do you support the moratorium? Why? And we'll start with Kevin.
I believed it was something that needed to be done. I took the time, the energy, away from my work and away from my family to knock on doors. What I thought would initially be maybe a few minutes at the door and get turned away or possibly get a signature ended up being genuinely one of the happiest times of my time in Greenport. People invited me in. I sat down in the living room, spent 30 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes in one man's living room. I sat at the kitchen table with somebody that was second generation here for 45 minutes. I heard that people felt the same way that I felt, and we were all very concerned about letting developers make decisions for us. We need to update our local waterfront revitalization plan. The document that is on file in the governor's office is from 1996. That is before the iPhone was invented. Think about that for a moment. There was a lot of work put into updating the LWRP in the last mayor's administration. 12 years ago now, 2010 to 2011. That document sat on the shelf. It sat on the shelf until I went out and did the work with every one of you in the community to get 200 signatures and to come into Village Hall, fill the place twice, and demand that action was taken. If you like me mayor, I promise you that I will get things done. I may not always be right, I will lean on other people for advice when needed, but we're going to get things done. Thank you.
George, do you support the moratorium and why? Or why not?
Yes, well, I've been back and forth on the moratorium. When it first came up, I was trying to get the village board to work on the code changes, because the end result of a moratorium is we need to change the code to protect what we have going on downtown. Right now, we have planning and zoning codes that are in effect, that could be used to hold some of the development that was going on there. We definitely do need to complete the LWRP, which we are working on now. There's one committee from that came from the moratorium. There's also another committee that's working on code changes, which is also moving towards the goal that we need to accomplish for the village. There's another committee that's working on infrastructure in the village, which is tackling parking issues, water, sewer, those things. And so the moratorium, it brought that all about, brought it all to a head, and that is being worked on now. The moratorium per se, if it continues for a long period of time, could be detrimental to the downtown business district. Somebody wants to open up a store or do something down there, it could take them a year to two to get something in the works to get it done if they're changing the use of a property. If If it's not as of right use, they'd have to go before planning and zoning, and that cannot happen during a moratorium. Also, we got served with one lawsuit from downtown from the moratorium. I'm afraid there'll be more that will be coming up if we continue with the moratorium without an end game and getting something accomplished beforehand. As we were told, we could have done the code changes first and then moratorium as a last resort. I think the moratorium came more as the last resort before some of the other stuff that the village board needed to get done. And I would like to continue and get those code changes done if re-elected and go and do that. And we'll see where the moratorium goes. I would do whatever's best in the interest of the village. We don't need 10 lawsuits and costing the taxpayers, all of you and myself, a lot of money in lawsuits that, per legal counsel, we could end up not winning the lawsuits if we override and continue with the moratorium.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George. Rich has to answer that question first. Do you support the moratorium? Why or why not?
I don't support a full moratorium. I support smart planning, and I think the mayor has pointed to a couple of the reasons why. I believe that this was a reaction to the fact that there was an inability to get the LWRP finished and updated. The plain fact is that unfortunately the village took their eye off the ball with regard to getting this LWRP finalized. So it is important that we continue to pursue it, and it did draw attention to the fact that we need to be focused on exactly doing that, getting that LWRP updated. But really, the question becomes, do we really want to risk, because we had a room full of people, do we really want to risk the fact that there could be somebody who brings a lawsuit against the village because ultimately there was a decision to pass an administrative moratorium back on December 2nd. So really there's a moratorium in place before we've even passed the moratorium proposed law that is pending. I think that there is plenty of mechanisms by which we can make sure that the development that people are fearful of will not happen. None of it has happened. There's been cases where there are speculation that things are going to happen, but there are no pending applications for any large development. So I do think it's an overreaction and a rush to react rather than be proactive. And I think if we take the time and follow the process that we were told by Payson University, we had two excellent professors come down and explain how this process should work by engaging the community for as many as 12 to 18 months to figure out what it is the community wants to see specifically, and then decide how to proceed. That's a more intelligent way to approach this problem, rather than reacting, throwing up a law that is broad and over-encompassing and potentially causing liability and a real chilling effect in terms of what we can expect.
I'm frankly confused where the mayor and Rich both stand. The mayor was against the moratorium and then ultimately voted for it when the community came forward. When he was asked about it by Long Island Business Journal, he said he voted for it because the community came out. I now hear he has concerns about it. Rich, on the other hand, signed my petition on November 17th for the moratorium with very clearly defined deliverables of what we were looking for as a community. The same thing that 200 other people signed. And now he's against it. I've seen emails on behalf of the bid arguing for the doom and gloom of the village and all the concerns that we need to be worried about. I look at facts. The facts right now are nobody has the ability to file for a large application, do anything with significant change. We're a village of 1 square mile with very limited resources. We have things we need to take a look at. Stid Systems, one of the largest properties on the waterfront, was for sale. The movie theater has been quietly listed for sale for a significant amount of time now over the past year before being publicly listed. A number of other buildings on Front Street have been listed, as well as some on Main Street. There are things that we need to be concerned about, and we all need to work together to protect them. I'm prepared to protect them, and I'm not afraid of big developers and lawyers.
Rich, 30 seconds.
I did sign the petition that Kevin sent around, because it said specifically there were 3 deliverables in that petition. One was to vacate the parking law, that was a proposed parking law. The other was to enact the LWRP and form a waterfront advisory committee. And the third was to look at what our zoning laws should be in the downtown waterfront. That's what I ultimately supported. I can tell you myself, as well as many other businesses, that Kevin seems to think endorse his idea, feel like they were necessarily sold a bill of goods on that.
30 seconds, George.
Yes. Okay, just to clarify how I voted on that, it seems to be unclear. I was trying to push the village board to move forward to try to change the code and not do the moratorium. When we got the petition, everybody was screaming at me saying, you have to do this and all. I voted in favor of scheduling the public hearing, which was a unanimous vote, to move it forward so that all you people could talk to us and tell us what you wanted instead of the decision just coming from the board. That's how I switched my vote. From one thing to go in and get the public comment from everybody and working towards the goal of finishing these other projects.
George. Okay, moving on. George, we have seen many changes within the commercial and retail community over the years. Restaurants and retail stores come and go without necessarily changing the landscape of the downtown area. What kind of impact do you think a new hotel would have on the village, positive or negative?
Okay. Oh, got it, okay. The downtown has changed a lot just because of a lot of little retail stores and stuff that we had have been closing up and they become bars and restaurants. Over the past 20 years, well, working on the LWRP, there was 9 bars in the village 20 years ago. There's 43 liquor licenses now in the village, all over the place. It's changing away from the little nice shops that everybody would walk around to, and it's becoming more just hospitality, more like New Orleans or something. And we need to try to keep those places by zoning and planning, saying, we're not going to allow every place to turn into a bar. We have some control over that, and we can do some of those things. Because we need people to be able to do more than just night entertainment. We need to do more stuff for the kids. The mini railroad that's going on up there. The ice skating rink, we've got plans trying to revamp that for next year to see what we can do to put a permanent rink in, to make something that'll be more viable than a temporary rink that's 20 years old, that just, with the climate change that we all know is going on, record warmth in January and February, we need to move that forward and that stuff, so the kids can do stuff in our village besides just a carousel, and the parents can have some fun, but also walk around and do stuff as a family-oriented situation. There's one other thing I was thinking of and I forgot it.
Just the hotel. That was the last part of the question, is what do you think a new hotel would do to the landscape of downtown?
I'm sorry, so.
What do you think a new hotel would do to the
Oh, the
landscape?
new motel, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, it's okay.
Yeah. The second design of the new motel, which has a 2-story building in the front and not a 3-story building, which matches the other buildings to the north of it, I think looks much better. And the 3-story port is in the back of the property, going along where the shipyard is and everything else. The problem we have there is that on that corner, there's 2 other 3-story buildings in the same area, and 2 other motels in the past 15 years have been approved that are 3-story motels. So a precedent is there that these have been allowed, and I'm, again, trying not to get a lawsuit and everything else, but people have already said, you're allowed it here and there, and 2 of the corners on Front Main are 3-story buildings. This is one more, and they redesigned it to make the front part 2 buildings now. The front part will be a 2-story building, would match ideally to Bruce's next door.
Rich, do you support a new hotel? What do you think that would do to the downtown, positive or negative?
I said early on when the developer came to a particular meeting and talked about his vision, I think I was asked if I supported it or not. I basically said I support anything that creates positive vibrancy in the downtown business district area. I think the specific details as to the size and scope of this hotel continue to have to be negotiated and reviewed, because I think there is a place for the ability to have reasonably designed, appropriately sized micro hotels that could fit in our community. If you look at the Manhattan, That was a significant project that ultimately received approval, and I think it operates and looks good within our village. There are a lot of statistics that say that a hotel of the right size will actually help fund our businesses and our small businesses in our community. I know that people are concerned about parking and traffic, and those issues should continue to be discussed. But I think the thing that we missed most was we didn't necessarily engage the community enough to really have the opportunity to have roundtables, public town halls, that sort of engagement of our stakeholders and our residents to really be heard as to what we entirely as a village want to see. So I think it could be accomplished. I think there's plenty more work to be done. And in fact, I would leverage that potential development with a requirement that they build affordable, reasonable housing in other locations. Because if they want to reap the benefit of what the hotel would bring them, we should also make sure that they invest in our community in other ways that will support the other needs that we have, one of which is housing. I also think that we should impose a hotel tax where we can generate some of this additional revenue to help us with code enforcement, making sure our Airbnbs are not being used as daily hotels. So I think there's lots that could be done to find an acceptable solution.
Same question, do you support the hotel as a positive or negative for the village?
Like the Sweet Indulgence site?
Correct.
No. I believe we need to look at plans that make sense to the village. It's too much for too small a piece of property. It's a simple no, as currently designed. They don't have enough parking, the scale is out of scale, it causes issues for the firefighters that I've talked to about bringing emergency services over there. My neighbor Steve Clark will not be able to bring tractor trailers into the boatyard over there. And at the end of the day, honestly, I have concerns with a developer who says he cares about the community and he's let a building sit dark for a year and a half. I stood up to his lawyer at a meeting and said, how can you tell us you care about the community when you've done nothing with that space? You have had an artist sitting in front of you for that past year and a half, selling photographs, Chris, of boats. Put them in there, open the place up, do something with it. Maintain the gardens. Angela took beautiful care of the gardens for her 29 years running Sweet Indulgences there. We spent 2 Christmases with no holiday lights on there. I'd like to understand why the mayor is having meetings with the developer suggesting that it should go forward, and my other competitor, Rich, isn't holding a bid member to account for having empty space. It's important that we work together as business in the community for the betterment of this village. And I think that is something that we have to do, and we have to hold developers to account.
For Rich, in your opinion, has the village missed out on collaborative opportunities with transportation, such as the Peconic Jitney passenger ferry, the LIRR, and the Hampton Jitney bus line?
So, I'm sorry, your question is about the Peconic Jitney, the ferry, the boat?
Has the village missed out on collaborative opportunities?
I think the village has missed this opportunity. Unfortunately, I think it's a process, yet again, of the failure to effectively communicate. This proposal, as I understand it, I was at several meetings where the Hampton, the Peconic Jitney people were there. They basically came and proposed bringing back the ferry to the Inner Harbor. And the idea of it not being acceptable there was simply told to them to go figure out something else. So the discussions, as I understand, moved to the visitor dock. And there's just been a real miss in terms of the level of communication between Peconic Jitney and the village in terms of, again, finding a solution that would be a reasonable, acceptable solution to allowing an operation that would bring more potential visitors to our business district from without the vehicles from Sag Harbor, and offering people to also travel to Sag Harbor from here. It bridges a gap between us and the South Fork that way that I think would be beneficial. It also would allow potential workers who may live in Sag Harbor to travel here because they may not have a place to live in the area. So I think it is a missed opportunity that we haven't figured out a way to sit down and explain clearly what we want connectivity people to do, what exactly we want them to spend in terms of to make this happen. And again, just making sure we communicate clearly as to what our vision should be. I think it's also, again, another opportunity for a similar roundtable in our community to really understand whether people support it or not. And none of that has been done because I think there's been a real failure of communication.
2 minutes, Kevin.
Transportation and infrastructure are both extremely important. The ability to move people through the village and across the water and manage it effectively are all things we need to be looking at. This is exactly what the waterfront revitalization plan is meant to manage. There are things that we're not currently doing. We don't have a harbor master. We're not dealing with the moorings we need to deal with. These are all things we need to get into place. This is something that needs to be done, and we need to bring the community as part of the updating of the LWRP and the Waterfront Advisory Committee, and the community needs to tell us. But yes, I do believe that under the right circumstances, some sort of transportation by boat with Peconic Jitney, if it makes sense for the village and for the people that live here and we're being compensated appropriately for it, should be considered.
George, same question, 2 minutes.
Okay. Trying to get more people here with not everybody driving their own car would be a big benefit. On the south, what they call the South Fork Commuter Connection, where the buses run up and down. They go down early in the morning, then they'll go back out. They also do it with their trains. We don't have that here, the luxury here, for people to be able to get off from Riverhead, get on a train in Riverhead or a bus, and get to where they're working in Greenport. They just get dropped off and they have to walk. If we can get more people to commute that way with mass transit, it'd be much better for the parking situation that's downtown. Use Claudio's as an example, 100 employees. If they could all come by bus or trolley or train and not all park their cars down there or carpooling, would be much better. I work on Shelter Island, and I'm in that ferry traffic all the time. And a lot of the cars are there, myself included, are one person in a car, and the ferry traffic is really long. We are working with the ferry and New York State DOT to revamp the ferry queue to make that more like what is down in Orient, with 5 lanes of traffic and get everybody off of the regular streets, off Wigan Street, last summer when it was all the way up to 9th Street. We're working on that project, and we're almost done with the Department of State, or DOT, excuse me, approval on that to move that forward, and that will alleviate a lot of the traffic down there. And it's also going to be better for people, better for the environment, better for everybody, with less cars on the road, and then they're not all jamming for the same few parking spots. So I think we can get that taken care of and get more train and bus service, which we try to. We've asked that do a model plan of what they did in the South Shore, but the South Shore is such a huge span between areas that they're promoting it more and doing more there than they are here, because they say it's just a short trip from Manitowoc to Greenport, but still if 10 people come by car from Manitowoc to come and work locally in our stores, if they weren't coming by car, there would be more room for residents and customers to get to those stores.
Kevin, this is for you. Do you think that the current code provisions relating to short-term rentals in the village are appropriate and or adequate? If not, how would you propose to change the code to address and or regulate rentals in the village?
I know the community spent a significant amount of time talking about this issue about 5 years ago. This is something that a lot of energy and effort was put into, and a law was drafted. The law was drafted, made the determination that the community did not want to see weekend rentals unless it was somebody who was renting a room within their house. The problem with this law is it's not being enforced. We have a code enforcement officer who wears more hats than any person should. He's also the building department. He's the building inspector. He's supposed to be enforcing rental laws, and at the same time, he's supposed to be chalking tires on weekends. I can't even fathom how this is possible. There are ways that you can immediately put a stop to short-term weekend rentals that are happening illegally. In the community I moved here from, they partnered up with an organization that offers the software on a monthly subscription price that goes out it very quickly determines who has properties that are being rented illegally within the village, and then files an action, and you have the ability to manage this in a much better way than having one person try to do 7 different things. At the same time, we need to bring our building department back, and we also need to look at code enforcement for parking. Thank you.
George, same question.
Okay, the village had numerous public hearings trying to move forward with the rental law, when all of a sudden Airbnb became a huge topic out here. It had not been an issue beforehand. The village board, with the 4 or 5 public hearings on it, listened to the public, took a lot of their comments on the whole topic, owner-occupied, trying to limit what was going on with the exposure. We crafted a law, and actually I had 4 other villages from the south side that asked for a copy of our law because they liked what we had done and would apply to their villages also. So what we had done at the time was really big. Does it need more to be changed a little bit? It could be tweaked. Code enforcement is an issue. We've been advertising for the past 3 years for additional code enforcement officers. We've had nobody apply for the positions. It's a civil service job. We're trying to do that. Right now we have 4 positions in Village Hall that are out trying to get people to fill those positions. Nobody's applying for the jobs. People don't want to travel out here, and unfortunately with the housing crisis, they can't live out here, and so there's more money to be made up west than it is out here, which is very hard for us to try to fill these positions that need to be filled. We all know that. The whole village board knows we need to get more people here working on that. One person's out sick, and everything comes to a halt. Alex is doing a great job of what he's trying to do. They're doing parking, rental permits, and stuff in the building department and all. He's overworked. He can't work 7 days a week. We know that. We're trying to address it. We just can't find people that are willing to travel out to Greenport to take the positions that we have that we need to fill right now.
I agree it's also, I agree it's also a real problem. Kevin has an Airbnb, so he knows the way that the prices that people can get to for Airbnbs in our village. It is the thing that is driving a severe housing shortage for those people that we need to be out here working, as the mayor said. I think that there needs to be better code enforcement, 100%. I think there also needs to be a real relook at the tax structure of how people who are full-time year-round residents here, how what it is they pay real property taxes versus someone who owns an Airbnb and ultimately runs a business as an Airbnb. They should be taxed at a higher rate. And certainly the person who simply just owns the property but doesn't live here should be taxed at the highest rate, because that would allow us to generate more funding for code enforcement to make sure that people comply with the law as it's written, because it does need to be enforced, as well as potentially find ways to generate additional revenue to supplement our need to build other reasonable affordable housing.
Rich talks a lot about truth, and there are some things on your website about me that aren't true. I do have a second home across the street that my wife and I bought with the intent of fixing it up for my mother and my mother-in-law. This house was available for rent when you were looking for an address here just a few months ago. Had you wanted a home, you could have rented this for less than what my mortgage is instead of hanging a post office box on your business partner's house. It's rented by a lovely family right now. The woman just moved here with her family as a nurse and is looking for a more permanent place to stay. And it is a longer-term plan for us to move my mother here and also use our family. I have never rented it short-term against the law in any way, shape, or form. Period.
I wasn't aware that it was available for rent. I've only seen it on Venmo and Airbnb, where it's available for rent if you want to book it for roughly $700 a night in the summertime. So I wasn't aware that it was available for year-round rent. But it is a business. It does seem that it comes up clearly as an Airbnb, just so that you're aware. I'm looking for
Moving on. George, obviously a hot topic. We have heard from many outspoken residents and business owners that the LWRP has not been successfully updated since it was first adopted in 1996 and then amended in 2014. In your 8 years as mayor, what obstacles have prevented this comprehensive plan from successfully moving forward, and what steps have you or will you take to finally bring it to fruition?
Okay, the LWRP, the document itself is over 380 pages thick. We've been working on it just recently. Actually, we had the village attorney and village administrator been working on it for a couple of years, trying to update and straighten it out. What was worked on in 2011, 2012 was submitted to the state. We had a grant to pay to do that. We had the meetings here in the school to discuss that with everybody. The state changed the format of what we had submitted once it was submitted. And then we had to take it back and reformat it and redesign it and send it back to New York State. When that happened and got reformatted, half the pages got corrupted and they were non-readable. The village attorney and village administrator were working on trying to get that all corrected. Some of that is my fault, the village board's fault for not making that a top priority. We had so many other things going on that we did not stay hot and heavy on it the whole time. So I'll take part of the blame for that. Yes, it was not on the front burner, it was on the back burner. We slowly worked on it. We talk about it every 6 months, where we at with it, but we're making progress. We've got through 100 pages, but we're not there yet. So more emphasis should have been put on that all along. That was not done.
Could you repeat the question?
Yep. Give me 1 second. Here we go. We have heard from many outspoken residents and business owners that the LWRP has not been successfully updated since it was first adopted. The question was to George is what obstacles has he have prevented the comprehensive plan from successfully moving forward?
I think, certainly not being in the position of supervising the progress that should have been made with the LWRP, I can only say that, the first LWRP that I read in 1996 was a comprehensive plan that was crafted as a result of doing the work by inviting the public to sit in the many meetings, the many roundtables, the many town halls, to ultimately craft what that LWRP said. It was revised and was done by way of a firm to assist in updating the more recent version from 2012. So I think the ability or the need to say that, okay, we reformatted it and it didn't quite format properly is a little bit of a pass. It's a little bit of a punt. Ultimately, I've been asking for the status of this LWRP for about a year in terms of when we were going to get it done and get it updated. It was always just kind of dismissed as the village attorney or the village administrator was simply working on some edits. I think the real miss here is that we didn't take the opportunity to, again, engage our residents, our stakeholders, to really sit down, take a look at it, and examine where we feel like the LWRP is not appropriate for our current 2021-2023 model. So I think the work that's finally being done now to get it to a point where we can all understand it in terms of having it apply to the current standards is appropriate, but it should have been done a long time ago. And I think, again, it's just lack of oversight and supervision in our current administration not making sure it happens.
First of all, I want to commend the mayor for bringing the process forward and ultimately voting for the moratorium. By doing that, it means we are updating the LWRP. The Waterfront Advisory Committee was formed with a number of people throughout the community, 13 in fact, 3 different subcommittees were filed, and there have been probably close to about 25 different meetings that have taken place. Together with that, Pace University came down, met with the team, discussed proper planning, and we also had New York State, their LWRP person, come down to discuss the process with us too. Assuming everything moves forward, we should be having public meetings in the next month, 6 weeks, and things will be happening. They're happening because the moratorium was put in place and this community demanded action.
Rich, now that it's 2023 and the LWRP was amended in 2014, do you feel the current uses for commercial, retail, and waterfront zones are appropriate? What changes, if any, would you make to the current LWRP to ensure a successful vision for Greenport's future?
It's a good question. I think that there continues to be a need to look at exactly what those commercial uses should be. I think there's certainly, you all understand there's a priority to make sure that those working waterfront uses are supported and invested in, that we secure the grants and the funding and the potential investment from outside sources to make sure that that stays in place. I think that there's a lot that we can do to look at supporting our downtown village corridor, our business corridor, to incentivize our businesses to stay open year-round, figuring out ways to make sure that we have the family-owned businesses, not the corporate entities that come in here and then shutter their businesses in the fall and then are dark until the springtime. There's lots that we can do to make sure that the downtown village remains vibrant within the LWRP plan, as well as examining what those uses are in the code. All that can be done. Again, I go back to the fact that Pace University had incredible intelligence and foresight and education that they brought to our village. I was incredibly disappointed that we did not offer that opportunity for them to stand up here and speak to you all in terms of how this process should work. It was amazingly insightful. It was actually, they broke it down to be really quite simple, but I'm not really sure why this administration didn't open that up to all of us to hear and listen and learn as to how we should approach this. That should be done going forward. If I'm mayor, that would definitely be done.
Kevin, same question?
There are a number of things with the LWRP and with code. There are a number of things with the LWRP and code that need to be updated. The subcommittees are working on those right now. Some of the things being considered are whether or not we should have annual rentals within the commercial district. Some of the other things that are being looked at are how we protect our working waterfront. What many people don't know is we only have 4 working waterfront parcels left in the entirety of Greenport Village. That's very frightening to me, and it's frightening to anybody that owns a boat or even to the ferry company knowing whether Steve Clark's boat yard will still exist in the near future. One of the things that needs to be looked at is how many more hotels belong within the community of Greenport. Should hotels be as of right within the commercial district, or should they be conditional use that is something that's looked at with a bit more care and a bit more foresight? These are some of the things that need to be taken very seriously, and ultimately all of this will be brought to the community here in due course as part of the process of updating the LWRP and the codes.
George, same question?
Yes. Okay, the LWRP is a very complex document. As everybody knows, the demographics here have changed over the past 10 years when it was last reviewed, actually 12 years. I mean, Greenport's a different place than it was 12 years ago when this whole document was worked on. Going through the first 250 pages of it, I see a lot of differences with the amount of type of stores, recreational use, everything else. At the time, there was 2 doctor's offices in Greenport Village. There's now 15. Everything is changing, and that's why we need to upgrade that and make that different. The planning said classes we had from Pace University and from the Department of State that came out here, they asked us not to have a whole group of 100 people there to do that, because we have a group that's in charge of 3 different things through the resolution from the moratorium, and they said keep it to that core of our planning, zoning, village board, and the people people that are on the spearheading committees. So that's what they said, no more than 30 people. So that's why we did it. We didn't open up to everybody, but we will be. The Department of State came out and said, just bring the people that are working on the code and the LWRP, and went through slideshows and everything else to us. They also will be, they haven't sent it yet, but they will be sending out their slideshow for anybody from the public that wants to pick it up. They can get a copy and see what we went through with that. There are future meetings planned for the core, the three groups to get together, put all that information together as the one overall waterfront advisory committee is what it's called, to get together, put that all together, and then bring that to the public. So we had something new. We didn't want to just go and rehash the old stuff that was already there that people might not have looked at from before and just start doing that all over again. We want to update all that information first and give you a viable live document from today.
I would just say that, I spoke with the professors after the presentation, and they indicated that they are certainly prepared, if we're willing to pay for it, to provide that broader information and explanation as to what's necessary. They sent me the deck right away when I asked them. I think there just needs to be a willingness to commit in a financial way to get the expertise and the guidance that we all want, that we all need, to make sure that we can plan properly in the future.
Kevin, do you own any properties or have vested interests within the village of Greenport or otherwise that would pose a conflict of interest in your decision-making for what's in the best interest of the village? How would you propose to address any perceived conflicts of interest?
I don't own any commercial property on the entirety of the North Fork, nor do I have any partnerships in any businesses on the North Fork, nor do I provide any advice or counsel to anybody with any businesses on the North Fork. I have nothing that would compromise me in serving my duty as your mayor if you choose me to be your mayor. In fact, I will be looking at things from the perspective of somebody who lives here. Somebody who walks the streets every morning, going to get coffee over at Sterlington Deli, somebody that stands in line, somebody that sits in his backyard having barbecues and is concerned about things that every single person who lives here is concerned about. Thank you.
Same question, George.
The only property I own in Greenport is my home, that I live there with my family, and I have no other vested interest in any property in the village.
I actually own the brewery located, the old firehouse, located on Carpenter Street. We bought that 14 years ago. That's the property that I own within the village of Greenport. I also own property in the town of Southwold, own the brewery in Conic, as well as my original family home in Southwold town as well. I have some small other interests, minor percentage interests in other commercial properties located in Conic and town of Southwold. But honestly, there's nothing that, in terms of my ownership outside the village of Greenport, that would ever create a conflict relative to my ability to serve with my loyalties and my responsibilities to the village of Greenport.
George, we are experiencing an economic climate that has costs rising across the board. If you don't raise taxes, what area of the budget would have to be cut in order to keep taxes at their current rate? Or do you believe that taxes must increase in order for the village to take care of infrastructure and assets, including any new or outstanding bonds?
Okay, that's a very good question. I mean, we're at a point now with, I talked about the employees before, that we don't pay enough money out here for people to travel out this way. We need to up the game, and we need to start increasing taxes some. In the 8 years I've been on the board, that I've been mayor, excuse me, our tax rate, we've gone up 6.3% in 8 years combined. 4 years we've lowered taxes, 4 years we did minimal increases. I feel very strongly that the elderly people, my mother, people like that, the elderly ones, people say, well, it's only a small percentage, just raise the taxes anyway, they'll be able to afford it. Well, some of those people can't afford it. They can't afford the increased taxes, even though it's small, but it might be between getting medicine or food for themselves. So that's why I've worked very hard to do that and do the projects we've done with grant money, with other people's money, have them do stuff and invest here so we didn't have to raise taxes. Well, we are getting to a point now to hire a second code enforcement officer or fill the other positions. We need to increase our salaries village-wide to a percentage that's still underneath the tax cap, but we need to do something to entice people to come out here, to leave the jobs that they're at now, to come here, qualified people, to take over the positions that we need. So it's been something I've been very strong about. I've been adamant about it. We had a lot of money in reserves when I took over. We've used that money to do your roads, your curbs, your sidewalks. Instead of having money in the bank and getting little interest on it, we took that money and invested it in you and in Greenport. And so we're not getting the interest, but now we're getting to the point where we need to do something. So taxes will have to go up in the near future.
Try again. I think it's indicative of the fact that when we find that we can't staff people within our village and we're posting jobs at $14 or $15 an hour and we can't fill those jobs, that it's clear that we need to really look at what we are doing relative to our revenue stream and our ability to fill those positions, not only within the village, but also making sure that our assets and our resources are protected and we have the appropriate funding to repair them and replace them as needed. I think one of the things we should look at is with our sewer connection fees. The idea of not having increased sewer connection fees for the number of years that we haven't, where we are considering projects outside the village and offering potential contracts to hook those developments up to sewer and not make sure that we are leveraging that potential development to the fullest extent to generate as much revenue as possible is a miss. I think if ultimately we all want the things that we want and the protection we want, we have to be prepared for a slight increase in taxes where appropriate. But that should also mean that we are looking at things like a hotel tax where we can generate revenue not upon our residents' backs, but ultimately on those people that show up here. I feel like there should be a restructuring of the property tax for Airbnb owners. They should pay more. That is a business. They're running a business within our village. They should pay their fair share. I think we can set up a structure by which our older residents pay less tax. We can figure out simple ways to mirror the star and the enhanced star exemptions for our older residents. But ultimately, there should be a structure and a complete top-down look at what we need to do to generate sources of revenue, to fill the needs, fill the jobs that are not being filled, figure out a way to do it that's fair.
Number one, I think the biggest opportunity we have, again, as I spoke earlier, is in getting grants and funding from the state and federal government to take care of things that need work over the next 5 to 10 years. If we do that, we will keep these items off the backs of the taxpayers and the homeowners here. As far as raising fees for extending services to entities outside the community, I think it's a fantastic idea. Something that Rich and I agree with, and I believe the mayor does too. What I'm confused about, though, is Rich, on your website, it says you're a partner in Silver Sands Hotel, which you didn't mention just a moment ago, and I also understand that the village extended sewer over there.
You should respond to that. I am actually a .001. I think I indicated, Kevin, that I own small percentages of other commercial properties within the town of Southold. I am a .0014. It's like less than 1/100th of a percentage owner in the Silver Sands project. However, Silver Sands is connected to the Greenport sewer and has been for 30 years, 20-something years. So there hasn't been any change in terms of the fact that Silver Sands is still connected to Greenport Sewer. Ultimately, Silver Sands is being restored to its original iconic condition, and nothing else has been done there. The village has been intimately involved. I know there's been a lot of smear campaigns and documents that have been circulated, who knows by whom, I guess, about the fact that there are all sorts of bad things that are going on there. But the reality is the town and the village have been intimately involved. There's nothing going on there that's bad. There's nothing that's been done illegally or improperly. And ultimately, that property is going to once again be the iconic location. It won't be a casino. It won't be a wing casino. It won't be a related development, industrial development. It's going to be the original hotel, and it's going to be a lot less than $700 a night, like some Airbnbs.
George?
Okay. Just to continue on what Richard said there about outside hookups to the village and all, the village is in the business of selling sewer, electric, and water. And we do that to make a profit and invest back into the system. The project that was talked about up on the North Road, I know it's controversial, some people didn't like it or whatever, but something's going to be built there anyway. The contract that we had that was talked about, that was tabled,